Hey guys, this live is about codependency and giving you tools to help you on your journey. If this resonates with you, then this video is for you. Hey everyone. So as always, I don't like to take long to get into it. So we're going to hit the ground running. Good morning, everyone. I put on my Instagram stories that I was going to do this live either yesterday evening or Saturday morning. And as Saturday is here, I just kind of felt like, do it, girl. And I feel like the Holy Spirit made a way for us to do this live because for the first time in a very long time, both of my girls are asleep. Well, actually, one of them is talking, but she's settled in the bed, so that's great. So hopefully I don't think this is going to be super long. I'm aiming for about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. As always, you can ask questions in the chat and I will try my best to answer. So we are talking about codependency today. Send this video to someone that you know would benefit from this message. One thing I've learned about codependency from my personal studies, my therapeutic training, and also my professional practice is that so much more of us struggle with codependency than we actually think. And if it's not the narrative or the whole narrative of your life, you'll find areas or aspects of codependency in certain relationships that you have. So I know that this is a message that will impact so many of us. So do share it. Let's get started. Okay, so I think it's important to talk about the origins of codependency. Then we're going to define it. Then we're going to look at some of the signs of codependency. And then we're going to look at like healing, curing codependency, as I've titled it. So codependency actually was a term that came about when they saw the families of alcoholics. When alcoholics were going to get help, get treatment from AA meetings, like Alcoholics Anonymous, they found that these alcoholics that were in recovery, who were dependent on alcohol, because that's what alcoholism is, right? Dependency on alcohol. They found when they looked at the families of alcoholics that there was this unhealthy relationship and addiction that the family had to the alcoholic. And that's actually where the term codependency comes from. So when we're saying codependency, co means alongside, like collaborate, co-labor, all of that stuff. Codependency. So these alcoholics had a dependency on alcohol, but their family members had some sort of dependency on them. And it's quite an interesting study that was taking place in Minnesota, I believe it was. But they found that there was this need to overhelp the alcoholic, to be there for the alcoholic, to be there, be present. So that's where the term essentially comes from. And as you guys can see, this kind of paints an image of what codependency actually is. Codependency is described as an emotional or behavioral condition that affects an individual's ability to have a healthy, mutually satisfying relationship. It's also known as relationship addiction. So I'm going to come back to that term a lot, relationship addiction, because people with codependency often form or maintain relationships that are one-sided, emotionally destructive, and or abusive. So in the scenario that I mentioned, where the term came from with the study in Minnesota, they found that the family structures, it's like they relied on the alcoholic to be an alcoholic. Like people were used to being present, running to the beck and call of this alcoholic, like the person that had alcoholism, running to their beck and call, being present. And what it started to produce within the people around the alcoholic was a need to be present, a need to be needed by someone. So codependency for me, when I examine it, I think it exists in two main categories: the needy and the needed. The needy and the needed. So if you look at your personal life, you might find that you might fit into one of these two categories. But the needy is someone who consistently, we're talking about relationship addictions, yeah? So the needy is someone who looks to someone else to give them that sense of self-worth. I need you to provide me with something that I don't already have. And then we have the needed, which also looks to someone else for the self-worth, but their self-worth primarily comes from the fact that they are needed. You need me. And both of those are forms of codependency. So whether you are the needy person or the needed person, it's still codependent. So some of the signs of codependency that I've seen is people that have real difficulty saying no. people pleasing. You feel as though if I say no to this person, they're going to hate me. They're not going to like me. And struggling with people pleasing doesn't automatically mean that you have codependency, but it is definitely a sign and a symptom of it. Welcome to everyone that's joining. It's definitely a sign and a symptom of it. If you struggle to say no, you have troubles communicating effectively for fear of offending, fear of hurting people, then there's something somewhere in your mind that has said, I need people to like me to the detriment of me. That's problematic. People that have codependency often struggle with the fear of rejection and or abandonment. I don't want to be rejected. I have fears of being abandoned. If I assert myself, if I say what I like or what I don't like, I might be rejected. I might be abandoned. At the core of codependency is rejection. It's abandonment. Another sign is difficulty making decisions in a relationship. You feel as though you need the other person's approval. You need the other person to validate it before it can be real. Also, another sign is difficulty identifying your own feelings. You know, who am I? The average person has, I don't know if you guys remember like plant biology and stuff, but you have different membranes. You have like a permeable membrane, a impermeable membrane, a semi-permeable membrane. I don't know how I remember this, but you have different membranes around a plant cell or a cell in general, right? When you have good boundaries, then you have a selectively or a semi-permeable membrane. You're able to allow certain things in and expel certain things out. Someone who's codependent does not have a membrane around, or an adequate membrane around their peripheral. So they don't have the resources to be able to say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. Yeah, they find themselves enmeshed in their relationship structures. Everything is this, yeah? So difficulty identifying your feelings, difficulty communicating in relationships, valuing the approval of others more than you value yourself. Welcome to everyone that's joining. So one of the things I've said is that codependency typically exists in two categories: the needy and the needed. The needy and the needed. So the person who is super needy, they need someone else for their basic core needs. And the person who needs someone else, but so that they can feel a sense of validation from being needed. Like, come to me. I'm the one that people come to. I'm the strong friend, right? The strong friend is often a sign of codependency, when you feel like you can't let down your own guard to bring other people in to your existence. Like, you feel like you have to be the person to come forward. Another sign of codependency is the misappropriation of responsibility. It's all on my shoulders. If I don't do it, who's gonna do it? If I don't step up, who's gonna step up? That's a sign of codependency. It places an unnecessary amount of expectation on you that is not necessary, unnecessary. And just to kind of share about my personal experience with this, I remember feeling that if I wasn't in certain people's lives in the way in which I was, if I wasn't that person that was encouraging, challenging, pushing, giving advice towards someone, then something terrible is going to happen to them and it's going to be my fault. Now, I didn't realize this was the fullness of my mindset at the time, but over time I've been able to identify that I actually had these fears of if they call me and I don't pick up, if they reach out to me and I don't, speak to them in an adequate amount of time and something bad happens, it's my fault. And this impacted the way in which I would relate to certain people, where I felt as though I'm the one to give advice, come to me. And much of my healing has been realizing that actually, especially when I'm talking to adults, I am not responsible for your choices. I'm not responsible for your actions. I'm not responsible for any of that. Now, in relationships, we're going to talk about interdependence as well, because I think the cure for codependency is not complete independence, right? It's interdependence. So there is room for impact and influence in our relationships, but the buck doesn't stop with me. And for a long time, I felt as though the buck stopped with me, but it doesn't. Yeah, and it was even to the point that as a minister serving in pastoral leadership, I felt as though, well, if this person leaves the faith, if they leave the church, then there's something here that I need to work on. Like, it's me. And realizing that actually, no, God is the good shepherd, not me. And whilst he allows some of us to come alongside in the role of a shepherd, we are not the good shepherd. It's not us in totality. So that's also a bit of my journey with codependency. Another sign of codependency is lacking trust in yourself and having poor self-esteem. Having fears of abandonment or an obsessive need for approval. Having an unhealthy dependence on relationships, even at your own cost, even at your own detriment. If I need this person in my life, right? Having an exaggerated sense of responsibility for the actions of others. I mentioned that. A question that I have for you, and a question that I always think about and ask with my clients when it comes to codependency, is who do you rely on? Who are you dependent on? Who are you, you feel as though actually if I need you in my life because of XXX. What parameters do you feel like you need to meet relationally to feel like, wow, that was a great day. I feel so satisfied. Yeah. Where do I get my core needs met? These are some of the questions that I always start with, because these identify the codependent relationships in our lives. So it could be your spouse. Like, if they tell me that it's great, it's great. Like, I don't need anybody else. Like, it's you. It's all you. It's all you. It's all you. It could be a friendship where it's like, I wait for your approval in order to feel like I've done something amazing. Or it can be in a relationship where remember we mentioned the needed and the needy, right? It could be when you tell me that the advice that I gave you worked and it was so amazing, I feel great. When I see that you're growing spiritually, I feel great because I know that I contributed to that. Yeah. So where do you get your core needs met? With whom do you get your core needs met? Who do you rely on? What parameters do you feel like you need to meet relationally to be able to feel that sense of relief, like I've done my job for today? These are some of the ways in which you're able to identify, actually, I might have a codependent relationship here. Now, something that I know about codependency anecdotally, even though I haven't read about this, you can have latent codependency. So there might not be an object of your codependency right now, but sometimes it just takes getting into that one relationship, that one romantic relationship. You drop all your friends for that one person. That person becomes your be-all and end-all. What they breathe, like they become the air you breathe, right? And it's interesting because codependency is interwoven in so much of pop culture. Like Jordan Sparks, Chris Brown, I love this song, but tell me how I'm supposed to breathe with no air. Like, I'm sorry, no one should be your air. No one should be your air. How can I live without you? Anything that says, how can I live without you? I want to know, like, codependency. Codependency, no one should be that. And I remember listening to a message by Francis Chan, and it was on relationships, but he essentially was saying that, like, in a relationship there needs to be a level of wholeness that we all experience, right? Imagine we're all underwater, and underwater, like, we all are connected to our oxygen tanks, right? So we have something in our mouth going into, like, the oxygen tank at the back of us, and we are all breathing well. And so we can go around and look at the fishes, right? We can enjoy the environment. We can swim. We can do all of that stuff. But in unhealthy relationships, there isn't a steady supply of oxygen. So we're fighting one another for oxygen. We're taking from one another the oxygen that we need to survive. And it might feel good because we're going to talk about some of the highs that come with codependency, because it is an addiction. And the way addictions work, we have dopamine cycles and stuff like that. But there's a sense of taking from someone that which does not belong to you. Yeah. And so in codependency, we don't have adequate oxygen supplies. I need you to provide me with oxygen, and that's not okay. And that actually just brings me to the 10 Commandments, because I feel, just as a Christian therapist and as a Christian primarily, God speaks to all of this stuff. And there's a reason why the first 3 commandments, the first is, you shall have no other God before me. The second, do not make for yourself any idols, any graven images. And the third, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. Right there, we have God anchoring us to himself, right? Have no other God before me. Do not make any idols. And for us as modern day Christians, our idols do not look like graven images. It's not a golden calf, right? But sometimes those idols are the idols of relationships. An idol is anything I feel like I need to survive outside of God. And I'm not talking about physiological needs. When we talk about codependency, we're talking about relational needs. I have to have this in order to survive. That's problematic. Yeah, and that's where we're kind of stepping into idol territory, where it says, do not take onto yourself any graven images. So I want us to have a think, yeah, because sometimes it's easy to think about the far extreme. Well, you know, I'm not at that point, or I'm not at this point, but is there any person, any relationship in your life that you feel as though you need in order to survive? We'll ask ourselves that. So let's talk about some of the origins of codependency. So I'm of the opinion, and I think that we see this psychologically, a lot of the issues that we do face stem from childhood. It stems from our upbringing. It's very rare to meet someone who had a very healthy childhood and childhood experiences that becomes codependent. Yeah, typically you see a secure attachment style, and it doesn't mean perfection, right? But you see a trend of, you know, interdependent relating with people. But typically when we see codependency in people, there's certain markers that we look for. So for example, in the home, certain descriptors might be, you felt unsupported, you felt unsafe, you were dealt with harshly, things were performance orientated, there were unrealistic expectations placed on you, your household was perfectionistic, it was abusive, critical, neglectful, manipulative, controlling, pressure-filled, yeah, always feeling the need to perform. If I don't do X, if I don't do this, then there's a problem. Shame-filled, secretive, judgmental, denial of problems. When I'm talking to people that struggle with codependency, I also look like, what's your relationship like with your father? What's your relationship like with your mother, with your spouse? When a parent is unreliable or unavailable, it's easy for a child to take on the role of a caretaker or an enabler. These are codependent terms that we use to describe people. When you embody the role of a caretaker, you're the fixer. I have to fix everything. And codependency, I put this on my stories a few months ago, but I would love to see a study for firstborn daughters of Africans or West Africans in the diaspora, because there is a heavy trend of codependency. You are the second mum. I'm sorry. You know, and obviously I know that a lot of people throw that term around, you know, very innocently, but that's oftentimes a sign of codependence, because you're teaching a child to mother the rest of their siblings in a way that actually, in some instances, not all, it strips the child of the ability to be a child. Just be a child. You know, you are a child. And so we have this fixer. I'm the person that needs to fix everyone, bring the whole family together, do all of this, do all of that. And I'm a first daughter. And I remember once I was speaking to my former pastor about my family structure and about how tough things are. And, you know, God, like, you know, I'm really not enjoying this, or I don't like the fact that certain aspects of my home life is so dysfunctional. And I remember my pastor saying, like, that's not, like, it's not all on you. Like, that's your family, but that's not your family. Like, that's not the family that you've created. That's the family you were born into. In this family, your role is that of a child. You may be an adult, but your role is that of a child. And thus the actions of your siblings or whatever, it's not on you. Yeah, they're not your children. And so I'm feeling this. I'm feeling it. And so I really want to bring that to you guys today, because codependency has been, is something that comes up so much. And if a lot of us were more aware of the fact that we don't have good enough boundaries around how we relate with people, I think that this wouldn't be as much of an issue as it is. So taking on the role of a caretaker. You're the enabler. You're the one that has to bond the family together. Like, I have to go and talk to mummy to get mummy to be okay, then talk to daddy, then talk to sibling, then talk to this person, talk to that person. It's too much. And in certain environments, it made sense that you needed to be the person to appease everybody in order to get things moving. But the older you grow, codependency is about reestablishing boundaries for yourself. But I'm jumping ahead. This is getting good. Okay, so we're back to just upbringing. Having no grid or no understanding of what normal is, what functional is, because you just did not live in it. And I love that. Thanks for sharing. As a pastor's kid, I'm sure you experienced that as well. So yeah. That's a bit about codependency and where it starts. There isn't really, I haven't read any studies. I think a lot of when we talk about codependency and the origins typically come from childhood. But I do believe that there might be instances where people form codependency as a result of being in unhealthy relationships, even in adulthood. Now, whilst if you had a strong sense of self before the relationship, it will be harder for you to now become codependent, but I think it is also possible. And you meet people that had a really good idea of who they were, quite confident, you know, and in an abusive relationship, you find that their self-worth is completely uttered. Their mind has been completely rewired to one of codependency now and feeling of not being good enough. So I mentioned that the true cure, or rather than codependency, the idea is to seek interdependence. But before that, I think I want to say, when I spoke about codependency and the desire to get your needs met, your core needs met by someone else, as Christians, we have to stop and we have to pause and realize God said, do not make a God for yourself in anything else, in anyone else. That the beginning of curing codependency is coming to dependence completely on God. Dependence on the person who can satisfy your core emotional needs like nobody else. And this is why the further we drift from God, the more we struggle with things like codependency, the more we struggle with things like avoidant attachment styles and anxious attachment styles and the myriad of things that come with that. But actually, if we come back into the core of who we are and who God has called us to be, we actually begin to find that these things start to resolve themselves. It still can require work and actually living out the reality of Christ. But it's hard for me to talk about curing codependency without talking about our relationship first with Jesus, because within every single one of us is a neediness, an unlimited neediness that can only be met by the unlimited grace of God. Within every single one of us, there is a neediness, a desire to feel accepted, a desire to feel belonging, to feel like this is where I'm called to be. That's been placed within you. The Bible lets us know in Ecclesiastes that God has placed eternity in the hearts of man. There is something within you that desires more. And that's supposed to be met by the grace of God, by the presence of God, by the goodness of God, by encountering him in fellowship. He gives us the well done, my good and faithful servant. He gives us my beloved daughter, my beloved son. His approval is the one that is preeminent. And so when we talk about codependency, it's hard for us to talk about cultivating interdependence, which we are going to talk about. But it first starts with dependence on God. Because if he's not meeting your core needs, someone else is. Hence codependency. Yeah, someone else is. And for some of us, codependency manifests more strongly than it does with others, but it starts there. And in the times in my life where I find myself drifting back into codependence and neediness, or the desire to be needed by others, it's going back to say, do you know what, God, you are enough for me. You are actually enough for me. Like, you are more than enough for me. I love the term for God, El Shaddai. It means the multi-breasted one. And maybe it's because I'm a nursing mother, but it just hits when I say it like that. It also means the all-sufficient one. You get it? But the multi-breasted one? Like, that's who you are, God. And so when I'm looking and feeling rejected or looking to people to make me feel like I'm enough, it's coming back to God and saying, God, you make me feel like I'm enough. Like, I'm enough, you know, because of the sacrifice of Jesus, not just by myself, but because of you, you make me enough. And I could talk about this forever, but for those of us that are on here and you're really struggling with this idea, this need for validation, this need to be accepted, be it in your workplace, with your colleagues, with your managers, with your relationships, we have to come back to the beginning point, the starting point, that it's my relationship with God that will help me. It's my relationship with God that will sustain me in this life. We were not created to be underwater without our oxygen tanks, guys. We need it. Otherwise we drown. So, interdependence is what we are seeking. And I spoke about this in the Instagram live I did about attachment styles, that the goal is to seek a secure attachment style, which is interdependently relating with others. In codependency, love and relationships, it feels like a rush. It's a high. You know, when someone is like needy and they get in contact with someone who wants to be needed, it's like, it's all of this. It's like, you are my world. It's instant. And you see these relationships very unhealthy. Can't get off the phone. Can't stop talking. You are my everything. Like, I need you. I don't know how, I should have found some synonyms to need, but you get the drift. It's reactionary. It's compelled. It's very, very rushed. Love, on the other hand, from an interdependent stance, is steady. It's growing. It's not, I need you, you need me. It's, I desire to relate with you. You're helping me in certain places. I'm helping you in certain places, because it still is give and take, but not to the level of codependency. And it's not one-sided. You work on yourself and you bring that to the relationship. You bring the benefits, the goodness of yourself to that relationship. In interdependent relationships, we see a stable self-esteem. If you don't take my call today, you know, I feel comfortable texting you saying, hey, I called you the other day, like, please call me back. I don't take it as, oh, you missed my call. Okay, I'm going to miss your next 5 calls. There's an issue there, right? There's a stable sense of self-esteem that you have when you're operating interdependency, because you realize that no one owes you oxygen. I have my oxygen. I have my oxygen. But we are called to relate intimately. We are called to relate in a loving way. But I have my oxygen. Yeah? If you don't call me today, I promise you I'll be okay. And just therapeutically, this is something that God had to kind of like take out of my mind. When our practice goes, when we're on practice holidays for the therapy practice that I'm a part of, we send out emails with different helplines. You know, we're going to be away for the next 2 weeks, but here are, you know, reach out to the Samaritans or suicide avoidance, like all of suicide awareness, like just so you know that you're okay in this 2-week break. Now, some people might think, oh my gosh, how are you going to leave your client? You know, I am not your all in all. And a part of therapy is being able to allow your clients to not just view you as the person who fixes them. And career choices like therapy, ministry, nurses, those caring professions typically breed codependency because you feel as though you're the only person. You're the only person. But there's so much freedom in realizing that I'm not the only person. You know, I'm not the only person to help you. So yes, stable sense of self-esteem. Within codependency, we see a fear of abandonment, but within interdependence, we see a trust in God and trust in building relationships. My job is not to just throw all my trust on you, because God has my trust, but I can trust you gradually and increasingly. And that's a healthy sense of trust. So I wanted to just distinguish the two of those before we talk about healing codependency. So let's get into healing. So I mentioned that I think that the first step is coming to dependence, complete dependence on God. It's a declaration of dependence, acknowledging our reliance on him, that actually you are all that I need. The Bible lets us know that blessed are the poor in spirit. To be poor in spirit means to be needy, to be poor in him, like to thrust yourself on him. You can be a baby for Jesus, but you don't want to be a baby for other adults. So healing. The first thing is dependency on God, and really making that a point to work on. Waking up each morning and saying, God, I realize that you are all I need. Help me to love you more. Help me to walk with you more. Help me to trust you more. Help me to throw my cares onto you more. Because your yoke is easy and your burden is light. The second thing I would say is honesty with others, honesty with the people in your life, whether you are the codependent that is needy or the one that loves to be needed, have honesty. You know, I'm finding that this relationship, I'm finding that I'm taking more from you than I should. I'm desiring more from you than I should. And I want you to be aware of that there's something in here that is toxic for me. It's true. It's not good for me. And I want to be free of this. And this doesn't always mean, in some relationships, it will mean, you know, a clean break. And some of that, it's just really reconfiguring the internal mechanics of the relationship. How can I take certain steps away emotionally and create a few more boundaries? The third point is to establish boundaries. And that goes with my fourth point, which is starve your compulsions. You feel like I need to call you every single day. Every single day, depending on the level of relationship, might not be a bad thing. But if I feel as though I don't know if my food tastes good until you tell me it tastes good, well then rather than asking you, oh, do you love it? I'm not going to say anything and let you tell me if you do or if you don't. May or may not be a personal example. You know, starving compulsions. You know, I'm not going to pick up. I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb mode past a certain time. I love when I hear pastors that are on holiday with their families and they leave their phones at home or in the hotel. Like, they are not taking it out and about to do everything all the time. When you hear about ministers going on sabbatical, I'm like, more grace to you, because it's important to starve the need to be needed. And for the person that is needy, it's about starving the need to reach out for interaction at every given point. Peer support is vital in codependency. You need peer support, right? We need one another to survive, which is why I mentioned being honest with one another, reaching out for accountability. You know, if you notice that I'm being a bit too needy in this place, you know, could you flag that up for me? Can you share that with me? Can you provide me with tips and support? This is the journey that I'm on. Codependency is defined as relationship addiction. So think about any other addiction that you can think of. There's similar traits within codependency. It feels good. It's a high when my codependency is met. And so you'll need the help, because you will experience withdrawal symptoms. You'll experience withdrawal symptoms when you want to reach out to someone to give you that kick, but you're not doing that anymore. The last thing I'll say is to address negative thinking. Address that pattern, that negative automatic thought that keeps coming up. If I don't have you, I'm not going to survive. If you don't tell me that I'm amazing, it's not going to be okay. If you harm yourself because I didn't get to the phone, then it's all my fault. If you, and we see this particularly within parents that have codependent relationships with their children, adult children, that they still baby, they still are like joint at the hip, like joint at the umbilical cord. Codependency, addressing that negative mindset that says you are still my baby. No, they are an adult and they will make their own decisions and deal with the consequences of their decisions. So addressing that negative thinking, and I think therapy is always a great way to do that, but it can also be done in things like pastoral care. If you have a trauma-informed or a therapeutically trained pastor, in relationships, these things you can experience healing from this. You can experience growth from this as well. So I'm going to end it here. Just a few quick announcements. So I do something called 21 Days of Soul Mastery, where we look at things like conflict, embracing conflict, your internal well-being, dealing with emotions, healing, growing. Stuff like this is a key part of Soul Mastery. We have live video teaching, Q&As. We have pre-recorded teaching, a devotional, sermon recommendations, book recommendations. It's really an intensive for 21 days. And this is the third time I'm doing it, and it kicks off at the end of this month. So I only have 5 more spaces and then I'm closing up registration. So do hit the link in my bio, 21 Days of Soul Mastery, and you get it super cheap as well. Like, the amount of content that you're going to receive for what you pay, And then lastly, something I'm starting new this month. At the end of every month, the last Sunday of every month, I'm doing an online seminar on a different topic. This month, I'm doing walking with God through anxiety. So if you are someone who struggles with anxiety, that's something that you struggle with, like how to get that feeling under control, how to walk through anxiety, but not just walk through it, but walk through it with God, then it's for you as well. And that link is it in my bio? If it's not, it's going to be there shortly, and I'm going to post it in my stories as well. So thank you guys so much for joining this live on curing codependency. I hope that this was really helpful, and as always, if there are more topics that you think, oh, that'd be great for you to talk about, do comment it below. And yes, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, guys. It's been absolutely lovely speaking to you all. If you joined halfway, go back to the start, because I literally started with the definitions and the study that inspired the term codependency and more. Take care, guys. I'm going to enjoy a bit of the peace and quiet before the girls wake up. So have a great Saturday. Bye.